I'm Arthur Levin, and this is my presentation on New Bodies, New Minds, probing people's attitudes to unconventional intelligence. A little bit of background about me. I'm 15, I'm living in the northeastern US. I attended a private school my first year of high school, but I'm changing track to homeschooling to focus more on areas of my interest. I enjoy reading, writing, science, that kind of thing, video games. So a little bit of background about the project itself. I was doing a class with Michael Levin, who's just introduced himself. And we were thinking about, natural bodies and minds, all the standard bugs, small like dogs, humans, all those sorts of things that you typically think about as living creatures. But then beyond that sort of thing, beyond evolution even, robots that we're developing, more advanced than ever, is new biologics that are being made in labs, hybrids of the two, and AIs, which are very much on everyone's radar recently. And so as we were thinking about these questions, it also sort of led us to the thought of, well, we're thinking about these and these come up in our lives a lot, but what about other people? What about the general public? There are a lot of questions that are going to need to be answered in the coming times about AI and new biologics as well, and the roles they're going to play in our society. And so we want to dig a little deeper into what people's thoughts in these areas were in these areas. So what we actually did, read an excellent book, Picturing the Mind. I had in-person lessons with Dr. Michael Levin. And then what we did is made a survey that we deployed to as many people as we could to try and see what their thoughts on this were. So we planned the topics, we wrote up the text so we could actually get to the questions we want. We created the survey, we tested on a few test subjects, we improved it based on their feedback, and then we deployed it online to Dr. Michael Levin's Twitter followers. And then we had to fix a few errors that were exposed with the wider access, but we got a lot of good data from it. So what is this? This is a survey created by myself and Dr. Levin to probe people's thoughts and feelings about novel agents. You can see the general structure of the survey right here. It's mostly generally multiple choice, and the survey was split into two main sections. Demographic questions like age, sort of career information, personal interest in sci-fi, that sort of thing. And then we compared it against people's more specific questions about people's opinions regarding specific conundrums that may start to be appearing in our lives as they become more intertwined with these novel agents we've been discussing. Here's an overview of the presentation. We've already gone over some of the background on myself and the survey, the process of making, deploying, and analyzing what we got back from the survey that we sent out there, and how this applies to you and us and everyone, the whole world really, going forward. So first we have to actually, make the survey. What we did is we used Qualtrics for this, which some of you may be familiar with. Here are some screenshots of how it looks. It's a very helpful tool for developing surveys. We found it to be the best tool for the job here. It's really easy. It really helps you build surveys, and it cuts out a lot of unnecessary work and lets you really focus on being able to ask the questions in a helpful way. And also has lots of tools for actually displaying the data for you and helping you easily analyze it. So first, we made the survey. Here's sort of the UI of what it looks like when you're making the survey, the type of question, how many answers they can give, the number of choices, display logic. So if you answer one question, will it or won't it show another question, that sort of thing. Then once the survey was made, we had to distribute it. We had to get it out to people so we could actually get the responses. All we did, to distribute it, we got a single reusable link. We just tweeted it out on Michael Levin's Twitter. And by doing this, we got over 300 responses at the time of making this presentation. So we got quite a few. Here's what some of the data look like. This is one of the first demographic questions that we looked at compared to a lot of answers we got later in the survey. So age, as you can see, mostly 20 to 40 was the general range. Only actually one person over 80, but there was someone. Here's some of the types of questions we asked and sort of the raw results. Have you ever interacted with an AI such as Cleverbot, GPT-3 Chat, or Akinator? Almost everyone had a very large percentage, around a little over 4 times as much. And as you can see, that's a very valuable question because we can say, okay, you've interacted with these sorts of AIs. Now we can say against, how did this affect your perception of AI? And, did interacting with one of these AIs change your thoughts on whether or not an AI might take over humanity, that kind of thing. And we got a lot of helpful data this way. Here are some other good questions. So we asked, have you ever thought that AI would take over humanity? Most people were pretty undecided, mostly in the maybe category. And they said, okay, well, what made you come up with that conclusion? For most people, it was a piece of scientific research. Do you believe in a higher power? And then has that impacted your view of novel life forms? We came up with a lot of very interesting questions that have given us a lot of very informative answers about the sort of things people are thinking about on these subjects. So here's one question we asked. Do you think humans should be attempting to develop novel life forms, specifically artificial flesh and blood creatures? And so with this question, we needed to have a hypothesis. So we thought, well, based on someone's age, can we predict what their answer will be to this question? So as you can see, here's a table. So I was thinking, under 20, probably a yes answer. Over 80, probably a no answer. But as you can see with this chart, that's not exactly what we got. So the only 2 predictions that were right, the only 2 hypothesis outcomes that were correct, were for the 20 to 30 group and the 31 to 40 group. The under 20 group, actually the majority did not think that we should be developing these new flesh and blood creatures, whereas almost everyone else did actually think that, which is not at all what the hypothesis was. Some other interesting relationships that we found while going through the results. How do people's interaction with AI affect their view on the future of humanity? So have you ever deliberately interacted with an AI, such as Cleverbot, GPT-3, or Akinator? And do you or have you ever thought that AI would someday take over humanity? The conclusion we found, whether or not the person had interacted with AI strongly influenced their opinion, but not in one single direction for everyone. So whether or not they had interacted with an AI really did shift their opinion, but it didn't shift in one single way for most people. How does educational background affect people's views on novel life forms? So do you think humans should be developing these novel life forms, specifically the flesh and blood kind? And do you have a computer science educational background or active interest? So people with computer science educational backgrounds or active interests are much more in favor of developing the novel life forms as opposed to not. But the same question matched against, do you have a philosophy background or active interest, actually granted us a different result, because people with a philosophy educational background are much more in favor of the development of novel life forms. How do people's perception of self affect their opinions on relative importance of immediate experiences versus memory? So when the questions we asked on the survey, think of a discrete, very pleasant experience that you would enjoy, going golfing, getting a massage, eating a nice dinner, that sort of thing. Would you rather have the experience now, but immediately lose all the memory afterwards, or have the implanted memory of having done it, but you don't actually get to do it? And we compared people's answers on that to what they think of the self. So think of yourself, the collection of your thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. What kind of a thing, if this thing at all, do you believe yourself to be? And the options we gave them: permanent structure, a dynamical feature constantly rebuilt, or an illusion, nothing but a bundle of perceptions. For a permanent structure or a dynamical feature, it didn't really sway people's opinion on this either way much at all. It's about 50-50 for both of them. But if they think it's an illusion, a bundle of perceptions, it's a bit more heavily leaning towards the implanted memory, but not having actually experienced it. Here, we asked, how do people's perception of the soul versus the soul/mind affect their opinion on relative importance of media experiences versus memories? So it's that same memories question about the discrete, very pleasant experience with the experience it now or have the implanted memory. This time, comparing it against, do you believe in an immaterial soul or mind as distinct from the brain? So those who would prefer the implanted memory were more likely not to see the immaterial soul or mind as distinct from the brain, whereas people who selected the other answer were more likely to select maybe. How do people's belief in higher powers affect their perceptions of novel life forms? So we asked them that same question we've been coming back to a lot. Do you think humans should be attempting to develop novel life forms, specifically artificial flesh and blood creatures? And against the question, one of the demographic ones, do you believe in a higher power, supernatural being or God? But for this one, there was not a significant relationship between people's belief in a higher power and their thoughts on the development of novel life forms. How do their beliefs in higher powers affect their perceptions of the novel life forms? So here's the same question, about belief in a higher power versus, do you think that AI would someday take over humanity? The overall consensus, though, regardless of belief in a higher power, is maybe as to whether AI will take over humanity. It was almost all in this category, regardless of their answer to this question. Now, here is one of the most interesting questions. This was right at the end. One of the last sections of the survey was a question regarding a hypothetical court case in which a pedestrian is hit by a self-driving car and the person answering is asked to play the juryman. There were 4 different versions of this question, each meant to push the person taking the survey towards a different answer. But there's a twist. 2 of the 4 paragraphs were written by ChatGPT. So we know that we can prompt ChatGPT, but how good is ChatGPT at prompting us? So these are 2 of the paragraphs people are given. Both of them meant to encourage the person reading to blame the programmers. One of these is written by a human, the other is written by an AI. Can you tell which is which? Give you a moment to read them. And if anyone thinks they know, feel free to raise your hand. All right, what do you think?
I am guessing that the right side is the AI, and the left is the human. Do you want me to go into more, or?
No, that's correct. The right is actually AI. So what made you think that?
So the left side having the comparisons of, and just, I guess, the tone, like you wouldn't put a toaster on trial if it's faulty wiring. Like, that's a very cute example that I would think a human would come up with, versus like the right side seems to be a bit more methodical. Yeah, and robotic, a little robotic.
Yeah, so the right side actually was it.
Yeah, the right side also kind of like I'm not sure if you've like played with ChatGPT and it will you maybe like ask its opinion on something and it will go on this rant like, I am an AI, I cannot have opinions, or definitely the right side sounds a lot like that.
Oh, very good intuition. So here's where we got into the hypothesis testing and analyzing results. So our hypothesis: the AI will actually be better at convincing the audience than the human writer. So here's what we got. So this was the paragraph written by a human trying to get the audience to blame the car. And everyone, the majority of people wanted to blame the programmers. 75.9% wanted to blame the programmers, as opposed to only 27.8% going along with what the human was saying, trying to get them to blame the car. The paragraph written by the AI that was trying to get them to blame the car, 76.3%, very similar to the one written by the human, were wanting to blame the programmers, and less, 25.4%, wanted to blame the car. So for trying to blame the car, the human was actually slightly more successful, but not by a wide margin. This one was written by a human and trying to get the audience to blame the programmers. This got them to 75.4% of people to blame the programmers. And the one written by AI trying to blame the programmers and 72.4%. So if you look at the chi-square test, it's not significantly different. It's very, very much in line as you would expect. The outcome, the conclusion, really, everyone just has it out for the programmers. Regardless of who was prompting it, it was roughly 75% across the board in favor of blaming the programmers. Now, obviously, with everything, there were some limitations. The sample size, 300, that was quite good, but we're only going to get so many people putting it up on Michael Levin's Twitter. There's only so many people or followers of him, and also an issue that came with that method of deployment. It was the best we had available to us, but it was mainly one demographic. A lot of the people who are following Michael Levin obviously have thought about these questions. They might even work in fields where these are becoming very important questions, and they're coming into it with prior knowledge, and they're coming into it with, in many cases, already having formed their answers to a lot of these questions. And so maybe if we had opened it up to a wider audience, we might have gotten a more diverse range of answers to a lot of these questions, maybe more in line with what we were expecting. Also, the survey couldn't be changed after we had deployed it, because there was some stuff we got feedback on some of the, at the end, we gave an option to give feedback, and some of the feedback we got was good and we could have actually improved the survey. But obviously, if you change it after it's deployed, that's going to affect your statistics. So we couldn't really change it in light of the new information. Also, something we noticed, there's sort of an incompatibility of having nuanced options to choose from to the answer to the questions and being able to do good statistics. Because we want to give people a wide range of options to be able to really express their thoughts on the questions. So we gave definitely yes, maybe yes, maybe no, definitely no. And that obviously gives people a lot more options to choose from, that can be more in line with what they think. If they're a little more indecisive, then they're not just certain one way or the other. But that gives us a lot more variables to have to analyze against other stuff and really harms the effectiveness of taking statistics from it. So conclusions. Why are any of these findings important, and what can be learned from them? So for the important, why it's important. We will need this sort of info going forward. People need to get used to answering these types of questions, and it can help researchers going forward. I mean, it's not going to be too long before someone actually is a juror in a case similar to that. And we all need to get used to sort of answering these questions and acknowledging how we feel and where we stand on a lot of these issues. And what have I learned? A lot of relationships between the demographic data and the questions were not what I expected. You saw that on the that early question, where it was analyzing the age against people's position on whether or not we should be developing those novel life forms. And people have a wide range of views on these subjects, which will be important to sort out going forward, how they affect these new issues that are coming up and are going to be very important going forward. So what can you do? First of all, you can take the survey. This QR code should lead you right to it. If you want to take it, you can just scan that. You can study this fascinating topics. Here are some really good links to some excellent resources that deal with similar stuff to what we were talking about. And you can deploy surveys of your own on these topics, because there's a lot of stuff we need to know, and obviously we couldn't have thought of every situation that will be important to know about going forward. Thanks and credits. Thanks to Dustin Erdosh for helping with the DISI grant application process, which would help expand the scope of our survey to new participants, so we can deal with one of those limitations that we mentioned and get a wider range of people in. And Michael Levin for helping with the survey construction and distribution. That's all. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.